Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending where you are. I'm Quinn Tempest, the Director of Marketing over here at Vertical Measures, and I'm hosting our monthly webinar series today. Our webinar is titled Mining for Gems, 8 Highly Useful Yet Rarely Used Google Analytics Reports and Features, and will be presented by our very special guest and fellow Arizonan, Chris Sietsema. Chris is the owner of Teach to Fish Digital, and he's a digital marketing consultant that helps companies make smart decisions based on well-founded marketing metrics. And you can take it from me, he definitely knows his stuff. Chris has educated, trained, and shared knowledge with some of the top brands in the country. I do have a couple of notes to go over before we get started. Today's webinar will be available for viewing by video and slides, and we will go ahead and send everyone a link to the page with those recordings and slides tomorrow morning so that you can review them. We'll also be happy to answer any of your questions. So if you take a peek at your GoToWebinar interface, you'll see a little questions section, and that's where you can send me anything that you'd like me to ask Chris at the end of his presentation. Or you could tweet us a question or just tweet along with the hashtag VMWebinar. If you have any technical problems, let me know, but usually just signing off and signing back on fixes the issue. So I think those are all my notes. I will go ahead and hand it off to our special guest presenter, Chris Sietsema. Thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Quinn. Thanks for the great intro. Quinn and I were talking earlier about how she has probably the coolest name I've ever heard. Quinn Tempest.
Thank you.
Sounds like a wealthy philanthropist who travels the world and fights crime.
Wow, I like it. I like what you're thinking.
Yeah, write that down. Yeah, my name is Chris Sietsema, and as Quinn noted, I'm a digital marketing consultant, analytics consultant, living in the desert here in Arizona. I've got about 17 or so years. It makes me sound old. 17 years of experience now in digital marketing, and I've worked with a number of clients. So Quinn and her fellow Vertical Measures folks called me a couple months ago and said, hey, we should talk to our folks about analytics. Can you present? I said, sure. They said, here's the deal. We wanted to make it all about content marketing and really kind of focus a little bit about how you measure content marketing programs and campaigns and how you track all the things beyond just sales and transactions and leads. Like, how do we tell that our content marketing is working even if we don't see sales and leads come from it right away or directly? Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk a lot about content marketing analytics. As Quinn noted, there's going to be 8 gems that we'll cover. I talk regularly, I guess, a couple times a month about analytics, whether it be in person at events or at for webinars and things like that. I always start off my talks about analytics with this, just to kind of level set what we're really talking about here. So I think there's maybe kind of a misunderstanding amongst a lot of people about what analytics really is. And I think a lot of people think of it as like charts and graphs and pretty diagrams and things like that that kind of sort of explain the story of a website or a campaign or a program for marketing, okay? Really, I think it's more like this. And if you've ever seen this movie, good for you. If you haven't, you should. It's a great movie. It's called Groundhog Day. And spoiler alert, I'm going to kind of tell you the plot. It's basically about this guy on the right there, Phil Connors, I think the character's name is, played by Bill Murray. And he wakes up day after day after day, living the same day. It happens to be February 2nd, Groundhog Day. And it's a pretty funny movie, but it's got some real depth to it. It's actually on the syllabus for a lot of university level philosophy courses, believe it or not. But essentially what happens is he kind of lives every day or the same day over and over and over again. And at first he freaks out. Then he starts to take advantage of the people around him every day. And then he starts to do something really interesting. He makes little observations and makes little adjustments every day. And he keeps making those little observations and those little adjustments until he lives the best day possible. And that's kind of what analytics is like. We make little observations and little adjustments every day, every report that we look at, every week that we're looking at reporting. So, and we have to make those little observations and adjustments to create the best possible business outcomes for ourselves or for our bosses or the companies we work for, the clients we have at agencies, and so on. All right, so let's get into some of those gems we were talking about. And I lied. There's not 8, there's 9. I'm going to give you an extra one, bonus. So, and I've segmented these different features and reports into 3 categories, okay? And so the first category is all about precision. How do we make sure that we are measuring accurately? So we're going to talk about segments or advanced segments, filters, UTM codes. The next one group is going to be about veracity or correctness. So how do we make sure that we're telling an honest story or a story that's reflective of reality? Okay, and so we'll talk a little bit about custom events, some scroll or reader tracking, which I think is going to be really helpful for those of you who manage content, blogs specifically. We'll talk about multi-channel funnels and analytics. And the last group is going to be all about efficiency. So how do we make sure that analytics is working for us and not the other way around? Okay, so there's a lot of features within Google Analytics specifically that allow us to measure quickly and more proactively, as opposed to having to jump into analytics every day or twice a day or what have you, okay? So the first feature we're going to talk about is segments, but really let's jump into segments and filters because they're somewhat similar, okay? So if you're colorblind, this is going to be a total letdown for you. But imagine, if you will, this group of little dots is all of the traffic on our website, okay? And segments are really like lenses. If we want to view every report within Google Analytics specifically, we can apply a segment so patterns will emerge. So for example, there might be a segment for people who come from Facebook, or there might be a segment for people who come from a campaign that we've got, or people who arrive on a mobile device, or people who visit one very specific portion of your website, or people from Minnesota. Like, you can create segments for almost anything. So they're really helpful when you kind of want to break down your numbers into sections and manage that data and make really smart decisions about what to do next, whether it be an advertising campaign or website update or content marketing program. Filters are a little bit different. So if we're looking at this grouping of dots on the screen here, look at all the yellow circles or the yellow dots. Let's pretend for a second that we don't want those in our view. That might be representing traffic that's not real, like it might be spam, or it might be representing like internal traffic. So I don't necessarily want to track visits from myself or the guy in the cube next to me at my office. I just want to track visitor behavior. So if we apply filters, it essentially removes those yellow dots from the equation, so we can just focus our attention on real customer or real prospect traffic. And the other traffic that we don't really want to include doesn't dilute the data. All right, so back on segments real quick, and essentially they're kind of like I said earlier, they're like lenses, okay? So there are some out-of-the-box segments that Google Analytics will just give you, and then there are custom segments which you can create on your own, okay? And so essentially, like I said, they allow you to isolate that traffic from a particular source or geography or device type. Behavior segments are available to you, so all kinds of different things. And the ones on the left are just a sampling, okay? So let's say you have a blog, all right, and you want to create some segments that are specific to that blog. So here's 4 example advanced segments that you might consider creating. And this doesn't necessarily have to, relate to a blog. It just could relate to any piece of content that you've got on your website, whether it's like a group of videos or a group of checklists or a webinar series, let's say, whatever it could be. Okay, so the one in the northwest corner, if you will, the scanners and speed readers, that's filtering it's filtering or segmenting our traffic to those who access the blog but stayed less than 20 seconds. So either they scanned it or they're just not that interested in you, okay? And so that'll kind of allow us to see, all right, where did that traffic come from? If people bailed quickly, did they come from a particular campaign or source, and how do we fix that? Or if there are particular posts in the blog that don't get a lot of love, or they aren't really sticky, if you will, how do we fix those posts to make them a little bit more engaging? The one in the northeast corner, so the let's hope they're not driving segment, is these are folks who access the blog from a mobile device. So if you're interested and really want to see how many people are actually coming from smartphones or even tablets or whatever, even individual devices like the iPhone, you can see that by creating this particular segment up in the upper right. On the lower left, a common problem amongst bloggers, and I don't know if you have a blog, you might find this as well, and I've worked with some high-profile bloggers that get upwards of 300,000 to 500,000 visits a month. And a common issue is people visit one post and then leave. Okay, so this on the hook segment essentially looks at people who visit the blog and had a page depth greater than 2. So they not only looked at that first initial post, they looked at other posts as well. Okay, and then the last one at the lower right is the this blog thing works segment, which we've called it, and that is people who not only visited the blog, but they arrived at a thank you page or a confirmation page, and thereby they must have converted. So the blog visit actually converted, and you can see how many people that happened with, what sources they came from, and all that kind of a thing. What other traffic they might have visited along the way, all those things to tell a more complete story of what you've got going on. So there's really no limit to the number of segments you can create. I would advise you to get really creative, not only in how you create them, but maybe even the naming conventions too. Okay, let's talk about filters for a second. A common filter that you'll want to place if you haven't already eliminates ghost spam. We'll talk more about that right now. So have you ever seen traffic come from sources that don't make sense? So any of the ones on the left here, like SEM alt and share button.xyz and all the way down, you might just see just garbage. Like it's not even real traffic, and it's not. It's ghost spam. Okay, and so it's essentially bots that crawl the site and kind of muck up your traffic. And we want to eliminate this. We want to get rid of this. And so the best way to do it is, if you have ghost spam, you'll want to go to the audience reports, go to technology, and then network. And if you click on the host name primary dimension highlighted in that blue button, if you see your host name, let's say your host name is verticalmeasures.com. If you see a lot of other host names in there, there's probably a good chance that you've got some ghost spam in there. And so what you want to do is create a filter in Google Analytics that eliminates that spam. Okay, and so this is one from my own website, and I'm going to jump off here in a second from the deck and show you in my own analytics account how you can do this and what it looks like. But essentially, this is the eliminate spam filter, and it's all in the admin tab. And then I want to include traffic from host name teach2fishdigital.com, and anything else is going to be removed, right? So that's how we would essentially eliminate ghost spam in that particular case, right? So let me go there real quick so we can take a quick look at this so you can see it. But here's good old Google Analytics. Now, I won't show you any client data because I've got non-disclosure agreements and whatnot, but I can show you my own stuff. So I'm in the admin tab right here, and if I go to all filters under the account, here I've got this eliminate spam filter. And again, I'm including my own URL there, right? Now, oftentimes another filter you'll want to add, we talked about filtering traffic from internal sources like your own office, so we could create an IP filter. So the easiest way to do this is go to Google and search what is my IP. And then Google will tell me my IP address, which is like my virtual location on the internet. And if I want to remove my own traffic from my statistics in Google Analytics, I can add a filter. I'm going to call it IP filter. We're going to exclude the IP address that are equal to, and I'm just going to paste in my IP address and make sure I apply to that view, that particular account in Google Analytics, and now I'm done. And so you might have to do this a couple different times with multiple IPs if you've got multiple locations, or if you are an agency and you want to remove not only your traffic, but traffic from your client's home office and so on. And there's ways to do it where you can get multiple IP addresses in there with regular expressions, but that's kind of how you want to do that, okay? So there's another one. Let's go back here. The next one we'll talk about is UTM codes, and essentially UTM codes are like campaign tracking, okay? And so they answer the question, where do these people come from? And all the campaign tracking reports are just under acquisition in campaigns. And I don't understand how people manage marketing campaigns without doing UTM codes or campaign tracking. It baffles me. So you definitely want to do this. And let me talk a little bit more about how this works. Let's say you're driving traffic to a landing page. You've got your landing page URL. Let's say it's like verticalmeasures.com/analytics-webinar. And you're going to promote that particular page with a campaign. Let's say that's a retargeting campaign, all right? And you're also going to utilize the AdWords retargeting network. And so I want to capture information not only about how many people visited that page, but how many people came from my Google retargeting campaign. Let's take it one step further. Let's say we have some kind of creative with our ad. Our display ad has this particular creative. Let's say we have a % off offer and a free trial offer. This one's going to be for the free trial. Okay, so we want to capture the fact that these clicks came from the free trial creative. We've also got two different types of ads. We've got an apple ad and an orange ad, apples and oranges. This one happens to be orange, okay? So just an example of how you would do this, you want to be able to track all this information, so then you can compare, like, all right, did our retargeting campaign do really well, or was it our Facebook campaign? Was it our retargeting in AdRoll, or was it our retargeting in Google? Was it our free trial call to action or a different call to action? Was it the Apple ad or the orange ad? So you want to be able to track all that so you can make really smart decisions about what worked and what didn't. Now to apply this, you essentially append all this information to your landing page URL, all right? And to do that, you can easily just go to Google and search for the Google URL builder. If you want to find anything in Google, just search for it. Okay, so you want to go to the Google URL builder. It looks a little bit like this. And it essentially just allows you to place your website URL, the source, the medium, the campaign name. You can see that I've got an interesting naming convention there where it's retargeting _ free trial _ orange. And so I want to be consistent with my naming conventions. I didn't use the term or the content field, but I certainly can. You can track that way too. And maybe that's a better place to put the free trial and the orange data. But down at the bottom where you see that little green check mark, it essentially concatenates or combines all the information into one happy tracking URL with UTM codes. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. Now, if you've got a big campaign coming up and you have several different URLs you need to create, this might be the way to go, but honestly, it might take a little bit of time. So maybe a more efficient way to go about this would be to create your own tracking worksheet. Okay, and so this is what I recommend for clients, especially if you've got a lot of different tracking codes you need to create for a big campaign or a series of campaigns. This particular one that I've got a screenshot of here is just created in Google Drive, so it can be shared amongst folks. But let me show you how this works real quick, okay? I'm going to show you a Google Sheet right here. And what this is doing is I've got just options, right? So the reason I want to use Google Drive is because if I want more than one person to be able to utilize this document, it's a Drive sheet, right? So I can use it, Quinn can use it, anybody over at Vertical Measures or any of my clients can use it if they have access, okay? So I've essentially outlined, all right, here are our source options for our naming convention. Here are medium options all the way through. And then we're gonna track not only campaign name, but the creative and promotion, okay? So let's say we've got all these sources here, and what this is doing in this yellow highlighted URL, if you look at this formula, excuse me, all the way up here, it's just the concatenation formula. It's gonna combine all that. Now, if you wanna copy this, I can make sure that Quinn sends it out so you guys can take a look. You can use it on your own. But essentially it works like this, where I'm gonna go, okay, let's say we're gonna send traffic to verticalmeasures.com. And we said we were going to do a Google campaign to remarketing, and it's going to be a webinar, and then we've got a 8 gems creative, okay? So now I have a URL that's strung together right here that I want to use for my remarketing campaign. The other nice thing about this approach is you've got a record of everything that's in there. So if you can't remember when you're looking at Google Analytics, looking at all your campaign reports, like what was that review pet-friendly one that we did? So you've got a nice record of everything that you've done and everybody else who has access to the account has done for that, okay? So that's campaign tracking. Custom events, there's another big one. I don't know how people track their activity on Google Analytics without using custom events. They're extremely helpful. Here's how this works. Within Google Analytics, there's a few different conversion types. In the conversion reports, you can do things like track a conversion when people get to like 5 pages or more, or track a conversion when people reach the 3-minute mark during their visit, to kind of show engagement and conversion. Those might be really good conversion types for content marketers to see just how engaging your content is. The other 2 conversion types are destination oriented, in which you arrive at a thank you page or a confirmation or thanks for purchasing page. And then there are events, and events are a little bit tricky because They involve placing additional code on your site. So if I want to place event tracking, I'll typically do it for things that I can't necessarily add the typical Google Analytics page view code. So if I can't add page view code to a PDF or a YouTube video or an email address that I want to track how many people click on an email address. So it's essentially tracking clicks, okay? And so within your Google Analytics, you've got event reports. So here's where they're at. You've got behavior, events, and then top events. And you'll see up at that blue box and that blue arrow, excuse me, you've got event categories, actions, and labels. Okay, so there's a different value for each one of those different items or variables. Okay, so you've got event categories, event actions, and event labels. Let me show you a table of what we might be looking at here. So how nice would it be if we could track how many times someone hit the add to cart button? So the event category for that would be cart, event action would be add, and the event label would be add to cart, and we could dynamically place the product name or the page on which that add to cart action occurred. We can also track things like email addresses. Again, I can't add my Google Analytics page view code to your inbox or your email sending tool, whatever you use to send emails. So I have to add click tracking code or event tracking code to do that. Clicks to social media. So I can't add my own tracking code to Pinterest or to Facebook or to LinkedIn or whatever, but if I want to track how many times people click on those buttons that go to those channels, I can certainly do that with event tracking. We talked about PDF downloads or assets you would download, clicks to maps, clicks to watch videos, like all of these things can be tracked with event tracking, okay? And so there's a couple ways to do it. You can manually go in and add event tracking code on your website. The other way to do it is with a tag manager, okay? And so a tag manager is really nice because what it allows you to do, as opposed to placing all these different tags for events or tags for like Google Analytics and AdWords and Facebook and tools like AdRoll, Crazy Egg, and AB Tasty, or whatever tools you might use in which you have to place script on your site, it essentially allows you to place just one container tag. So there's one tag that takes the place of all the other tags on your site. So if you are a marketing person and don't know much about code, that's okay. But you might find yourself having to go back to the developer or the website guy or gal who runs the site and say, hey, can you place that tag for me for this event and that event over there? Well, if you've got this bucket tag, you only have to ask them to do that once because you can control all the tags from a separate interface in your tag manager, which is essentially called Google Tag Manager, okay? And so the other nice thing in terms of using a Google Tag Manager is not only can you add all those tags for all those tools, but you can create event tracking. So you can create little triggers within the Tag Manager that say, hey, every time someone clicks on that video, I want to track the number of times it was played and the number of times they got halfway through the video and all the way through the video. And every time someone clicks on my download checklist or the download guide button, I want to track that. And you can manage all of those little triggers from Google Tag Manager. Now, we could talk for an hour and a half just about Tag Manager, so I'll leave that alone, but there are tons of resources out there, and I'll point to them in a bit here for how to get more comfortable with Tag Manager, because it's a huge benefit to those of you who are managing metrics, okay? In terms of helpful hints, here's just a few. What I did is at that link up at the top right, you'll find just a YouTube channel where there are separate videos that show you how to use Tag Manager to add event tracking to track videos, to track engaged visits. So even people that bounce, if they stayed for, let's say, 30 seconds or a minute, you can track when they reach like the engagement stage, whatever that is. And you can set that to 15 seconds or 30 seconds or 2 minutes, whatever, however you define an engaged visitor. You can essentially create an event that will register in Google Analytics when that happens. You can track scroll tracking. So how far down people scroll, it'll fire an event if people get halfway down the page or 75% down the page, and even 404 errors. So if you have an issue with people getting to a lot of error pages, you can figure out, all right, where are those coming from and why are they happening? You can do all that with event tracking, okay? And so once again, I've got a little YouTube channel that you'll find with that link, and all those videos on how to do that are right in here. There's also a larger, it's an hour-long tutorial about Google Tag Manager and how to use that, so feel free to check that out, okay? All right, so again, we want to talk a little bit about content marketing. One tip or a piece of advice for content marketers and how to combine and utilize this information the best is see if you can overlay activity like this, scroll tracking, engage visits, YouTube plays, download clicks, map directions, views, all those different types of things. See if you can overlay that with whatever your marketing objective or whatever your target is, right? So overlay your YouTube activity with your conversion. So I'll give you an example. Just this week, I was working with a client that has like 10,000 YouTube videos or views on their site every month. That's a lot of views, right? So they wanted to figure out if there's a correlation between all those views and actual conversions. Now they sell heavy equipment. Think like construction equipment or farm equipment like hay balers or big drills and things like that. So it's a high ticket item or big ticket item, high dollar item. And they wanted to see, all right, we're getting a lot of views on our site for all these YouTube videos that we got, but do they actually work? Are they converting? And so what we found is there's a correlation between people who watch videos on their site and people who contacted them to ask them a question. Now, because they sell heavy equipment, they want to drive traffic to a dealer. So they've got a dealer locator on their site. There was actually a lower percentage of people who watch videos than those who actually, above all, across the site, who went to the dealer locator. So the average visitor would go to the dealer locator more often than somebody who watched a video, which told us that maybe people who watch videos aren't ready. They're not far enough down in the sales cycle to be ready to talk to a dealer, but they might have questions and they might be in the education mode or learning mode where they need to find out more. So what we're in the process of doing is surrounding their videos with additional calls to action to view equipment specs and download literature about how to use and maintain the equipment. And again, people were contacting them from videos. So ask a question, all those different types of things, because we found that correlation there. So again, overlay event activity with conversion activity, okay? Now, I think one feature that I think a lot of you guys are really gonna enjoy and think is pretty interesting, at least hopefully, is scroll and reader tracking. Now, you're obviously doing some content marketing, I would assume. And how nice would it be if we could tell not only how long someone spent on a particular post or a piece of content marketing or some kind of content asset or a page that houses that content resource, not only how long they spent, but did they actually scroll down the page? Did they read the whole post? Did they see that call to action button at the bottom? How far down that page did they get? And so this tool, or it's actually like a Google Analytics plugin, will allow you to add scroll depth tracking, okay? And essentially what it does is it uses events, custom events, and it fires an event when people are at the baseline or at the top of the page, 25% of the way down, 50% of the way down, and 100% of the way down, and 75% of the way down, et cetera. So in this particular example, like 14 people out of the 86 who are at the baseline saw the bottom of the page. So there might be something up with this page that we need to fix. Or we might want to take a look at the sources of traffic to this page to think, all right, should we use different sources or should we adjust our campaign settings to target a different audience, or is the message conducive to engagement? All those different types of things. So the link you see there, the scrolldepth.parsnip.io, that'll give you some code. Now, if you're not adept at doing some development, you'll probably want to work with a developer to do this. There's also a way to add it through the tag manager. And one of those videos that I mentioned earlier will give you instructions exactly how to do that. Okay, so scroll depth is a big one, especially if you've got some long form content on a site and you want to see just how engaging it is with respect to scrolling. Okay. Now I should say there are separate tools like Crazy Egg, and there's a popular one called Hotjar, where you can do like scroll mapping and like almost heat maps, like Doppler radar for your site. But this one is one of the few that will actually provide that data right in your analytics account. So you don't need to go anywhere else for it. It's all that data is housed within Google Analytics. Okay. Another one that's pretty similar, just a little bit different, is this reader tracking code. And this was actually provided by a gentleman named Justin Catroni. He's a smart guy. If you're into analytics, I would definitely follow him and subscribe to all of his stuff, whether it be his site or his social media accounts and so on. He's super smart. I rely on him for a lot of good information. But what he's done here is created a separate script. And again, you might want to use a developer to implement this, but it will fire an event when the page loads as the visitor scrolls, when the person gets to the bottom of that content, and then when the person gets to the bottom of the page. So you can see just how engaging that content is and if it's working or not. Again, content marketing often sits at the top of the funnel. We might be in like awareness or education mode, and we can't necessarily expect people to be ready to buy that widget or sign up for and become a lead right away. So it's important to measure these things with respect to engagement, just to see if we are moving the needle with respect to what the real objective of the content is, whether it's awareness driven or consideration driven or action driven for conversions. Okay, but this particular tool will help you get a lot more information about just how engaging your content is. Okay, and so the link up at the top right will go to a post where you can learn all about this particular offering. All right, let's talk a little bit about multi-channel reports. I think these are extremely valuable, especially when it comes to being able to tell the whole story and just where your campaign, your content marketing, or advertising program sits in the funnel or in the chain of events that eventually leads to conversions or good activity that we want to track, okay? And to do this, I'm going to use a bit of a sports analogy, so forgive me. The NBA playoffs are going on and everybody's complaining about how boring they are because the Warriors swept whoever they played. I think it was the Utah Jazz, and the Cleveland Cavaliers swept the Toronto Raptors, whatever. This play happened during Game 4 of the Cavaliers versus Raptors series, in which Cleveland essentially closed the deal. They won the series. So this is what happened. LeBron James played some good defense and made it very difficult for one of the Toronto Raptors to shoot, and he got the ball. And he started running down the court, dribbling down the court with it. And if you don't know who LeBron James is, FYI, he's the best basketball player on the planet, okay? Now, LeBron can't do it all on his own. So he passed the ball to a guy by the name of Kyrie Irving. And Kyrie Irving might be one of the best ball handlers in the world, right? Really good at handling the ball, dribbling, and making his way down the court. Once Kyrie Irving got the ball, he dribbled down the court toward the hoop, and the Toronto Raptors defense essentially paid a lot of attention to him. He sucked all the defense in and away from the three-point line where a guy by the name of Kyle Korver was standing. He sat in the corner, and he's a really, really good shooter, okay? And when Kyle Korver got the ball, he shot it and made it, and that was great, okay? So a lot of things going on here, right, in just one little play. And if National Basketball Association or pro basketball writers and statisticians told the story of what happened, like we tell the story of what happens in analytics, the story would sound like this. Kyle Korver got 3 points, and that's it. That's, you know, start and finish. That would be the beginning, middle, and end of the story, okay? And thankfully, you know, if you're into sports and basketball, like baseball and basketball have amazing statistics with respect to who got the points, who got the rebounds, who got the great defense and the assists and offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency and plus minus and all these crazy stats that mean something when evaluating players and teams. That's not really fair though, because it doesn't tell the whole story. It's not fair to LeBron. It's not fair to Kyrie Irving. It doesn't tell the whole story of what happened. The same is kind of true, if I can use a very shaky parallel, with how our campaigns work and how people finally come to a decision to convert or take action or sign up for information from you, or provide their lead information or purchase a product or whatever the case might be, whatever it is you're trying to do. So let's say, for example, someone finds you on LinkedIn and clicks through to your website from LinkedIn. And since they got to your website, we can add them to our retargeting pool. And so they come to your website a second time. This is visit number 2 now. They came from a retargeting ad. And while they're there, they might have signed up for your email newsletter. Not a full conversion, but pretty good. So they signed up for email. They receive an email, and then they actually click on that email and they come. This is now a 3rd visit, and they haven't converted yet. Okay, so they start at LinkedIn, retargeted. Now they're on the email list, sweet, and they haven't converted yet. But maybe, you know, your brand comes to mind, and they search for you, whether it be a product search or a service search or a brand search, and they come via SEO. still haven't converted. Finally, they feel, you know what, I'm ready. I feel comfortable, I'm confident, let's do this. I'm ready to buy that widget, whatever it is. And they come direct to your website and they convert, okay? Now, if we were to tell this same story the way that, we have been, it would have looked like direct got the conversion. Thank you, direct. Direct did all the work. Kyle Korver did all the work. And that's not really the case. And so what we need to do is utilize multi-channel funnels that tell the whole chain of events of the story in terms of what happened with an individual user and what channels were involved, okay? And so within Google Analytics, you can go to multi-channel funnels under the conversion tab and go to assisted conversions. And it looks kind of like this, okay? And so in this example, you've got channels along the middle of the page there: direct, organic search, paid search, referral, email, social networks, etc. In this example, paid search, referral, and email, they're much more likely to be assisting than they are closing the deal. And so those channels, based upon these numbers here, are more conversation starters as opposed to deal closers. They're the LeBrons and the Kyries, and Kyle Korver is more like direct and organic search, okay? So it's really important to understand what channels play a role in the funnel, in the sales funnel. Like, are we trying to get more awareness? Are we trying to kind of push people over the edge to consider our service or our product? Or are we trying to close the deal? Okay. Another report within there is within the top conversion paths, and you can find common paths that people take by channel, by source, by campaign name. I'm just showing you channel here, but you can dig in a lot and figure out what the real story is, right? So this gives you more information about who rebounded the ball, who drove it down the middle of the lane to suck the defense in, who passed it to the open shooter, and then who made the shot, okay? And again, this is really important because you want to kind of identify what channels and programs and content is most appropriate for different portions of the sales funnel, okay? And so I've just provided some sample awareness and consideration conversion metrics here for you. The See, Think, Do is essentially awareness, consideration, action, like the old school funnel. But the See, Think, Do, I've got to give credit to Avinash Kaushik, who is a Google Analytics expert. He works for Google Analytics. I would definitely read him. Super smart guy. But again, the idea here is that if you don't see your content marketing programs somewhere along the line here, then maybe your content marketing isn't working. If your client says, hey, we don't get any leads from this, or your boss says, we're not getting any leads from all these videos or these webinars or these checklists you're doing, you can say, no, not immediately, but they did come eventually. And we utilize that guidebook or whatever we're creating to introduce our brand, and then they converted later on down the road, okay? So hopefully that helps in terms of proving the value in the ROI and teaching everyone in your organization where that ROI sits, whether it be an awareness, consideration, or action, okay? The next few of these updates, I know we're running a little low on time. I think we got about 20 minutes left, are all about efficiency, okay? And so the really important thing to think about here is that, again, we don't necessarily want to do a lot of work in analytics. We want analytics to do work for us. So alerts essentially help us accomplish this. Businesses don't fail because mistakes happen. Mistakes happen. We want them to happen. I love failure. Failure is a beautiful thing because without it, we can't correct things. We can't make adjustments. We can't get better. Businesses fail because mistakes aren't found and corrected. So custom alerts allow you to easily find issues and get alerted, and so you can go fix them. Okay, so an example of this is a custom alert that is going to send an email to our email inbox, or I think you can send them via text message as well from Google Analytics when you've got something bad going on, right? So let's say we want to send an alert or an email to ourselves and all the guys on our team when we've got more than 10 404 errors in a particular day, okay? So this happens. This happens all the time. In fact, it happened last Friday. There I was, Cinco de Mayo, having a margarita, and then I got an email about how one of my clients had a 404 page spike. Crap. So I had to go back in and figure out what the deal was. And so what it allowed me to do was just get an update. Again, I don't have to go into analytics every day and just make sure that everything's okay. It's going to send me an update and be proactive about it and tells me when things are a little awry. Okay. And so I was able to find out that this particular client had a new slider on their homepage. They use those slider windows on their homepage, and one of them had a dead link. So they're getting a lot of 404 error pages. So we were able to fix it before happy hour was over, which is great. Okay. There's a couple others that you can do. Like there's a lot of different alerts that you can create. So if you go up into the customization tab in the top left of your Google Analytics screen, you'll find custom alerts. We can see all the different alerts that have happened. So you can see one here, like we had a low revenue day, a few days, a 0 transactions day. So we can kind of figure out, are our campaigns on? Is everything working properly? And again, we don't have to go into there every day and check. It just sends us an alert. And so if you want to manage custom alerts, you can click where that you see that blue arrow, and it looks a little something like this, where you can set up like a 404 page spike and have that send an email to you and a couple other people when there's a 404 error, which we're tracking with events in this particular case, a custom event that tracks every 404 error page. Anytime we have 404 pages or 404 errors that are 9 or more or greater than 9, right? So 10 or more, we're going to get an email, okay? Now, again, you don't have to create just a 404 page spike error. You can create things when you've got low traffic or poor revenue or no conversions or transactions for a day, limited leads, and other scenarios that you are trying to avoid with your overall marketing program, okay? So utilize alerts. They're your best friend. They're going to save you a lot of time, okay? Another thing that's going to save us a lot of time are shortcuts. So imagine, if you will, you've got a report that you kind of have to configure and work with. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, there are way too many reports in Google Analytics. There's too much, right? And depending upon what your business objective is, you might only have to utilize like 7 or 8 of those reports of the hundreds that are available to you, or maybe a dozen or a handful of reports. And so a lot of times what you want to do is get a report just how you want it. You've got to configure it so it's going to tell a story in a meaningful way. Let me give you an example. I have a client that utilizes HubSpot, and all of their HubSpot landing pages that they utilize for lead gathering and lead collection go to a thank you page. And all of those thank you pages and the URL, they're either labeled with a TY, up where you see that second arrow, or just the word thank you. And so what I'm doing here is I've created a little filter in my page reports that says, show me all the pages with a TY and a thank you. I've also got an advanced filter there to say, all right, I don't want to include anything for request info or contact, because that's something different. I just want to look at my content marketing, my HubSpot landing pages, not the contact us page or the request info page. Okay, so I'm excluding that information with that third arrow. The top blue arrow there, I'm adding a secondary dimension that shows me the second column, the default channel group. I want to see where those conversions came from. Of all the people that got to a thank you page in the last week or so, where did they come from? Did they come from email or SEO or paid search or direct? Like, what channel did they come from? Okay, then I can export this data and work with it and tell the story to my client about what happened. Okay, now to create this every time would be a total pain in the you know what, right? So what I've done here essentially is I can create a shortcut, right? So up at the top of the page, I just hit this little shortcut button, and it will save a shortcut for me. And you can save a shortcut for any of the ways that you configure reports. If you've got an advanced segment applied, if you're doing anything funky with filters or secondary dimensions, you can save it just as you have it. So if there's a report that you have to configure to tell a very important story on a regular basis, whether it's weekly or monthly or quarterly or whatever, save a shortcut. It saves you so much time, so you don't have to go and recreate the wheel every time you got to configure that report properly. And all of your shortcuts are going to sit, again, under that customization tab and in the shortcuts tab. So here's just a few where I've got resource downloads, contact requests, HubSpot pages, and so on. So you can kind of see how that works, okay? All right, that's shortcuts. The last one that I'm going to talk through here, and again, we've talked about breaking our numbers down into sections so we can see filtered views, segmented views. Content groupings are another way to take a look at your data and really make it custom for whatever your site setup is, or whatever it is you're trying to do, how you've organized content or messages and material on your website, okay? So to kind of talk a little bit about this and set it up for you, there's a difference between groups and groupings. So you've got an overall content grouping, which consists of a number of different groups, and there are items within each group. Okay, you can see how that's laid out. Now I'm going to give you a couple examples here, right? So it makes a little bit more sense. Let's say we have an online pet store, right? And we want to see all the things that are going on with our pet store. And we've got a dog group and a cat group and a fish group and a bird group. And within those groups, I want to see all the traffic and activity that has gone to the food page and the treats page and the health page and the toys pages and all that different types of things. So I can essentially organize all that information so I can compare and contrast how the dog products are performing or how the cat content is performing compared to the fish and the bird and the lizard and the whatever, the leopard gecko pages, all the different content we've got on our site, right? So it can be really helpful, and you can make it more specific to your particular setup and your business, essentially, to make some smart decisions about how things are performing compared to one another, okay? So an example is I work with a company that sells lotions and bath gels for ladies, like smelly stuff, okay? I'm not a sophisticated person by any stretch, but they sell smelly stuff, okay? Lotions and bath soaps and all kinds of stuff. So when you go to their site, you can purchase a number of different ways, and they've segmented things a number of different ways. You can shop by product, so there's one content group. You can shop by their fragrance collection, which is another content group, and their classic collection, which is like their tried and true scents or flavors, if you will, that they typically, like their best sellers, okay? So if I wanted to compare and contrast how these three options on their site do, I can create different content groups. And it might look like this. So within the admin tab, you want to go to the content grouping area and create your own groups. So this is the shop by product group, which is on the far left here. And you can see new arrivals, accessory bar soap in the top left. And you can start to see down where the blue arrows are. I've essentially grouped all the pages under new arrivals under one group, all the pages under accessories under one group. And so I can compare and contrast the shop by product group and all the different areas within there, see what is working best, okay? So this is extremely important, not only for e-commerce, but I think for content marketing too. So an example of how to utilize these and really segment your data and your content appropriately would be to create groups by topics. So maybe you talk about educational materials, or maybe you talk about sales materials, or let's say if you're an agency or whatever, one topic would be SEO, another topic would be email marketing, another topic would be social media marketing. And you can group all of the content that talks about those different topics within that group, right? So you've got SEO, blogs, videos, webinars, downloads. You've got email marketing, blogs, videos, webinars, downloads, and so on. And you can really kind of compare and contrast how all of those different types of content work together or compare against one another, how they perform, how long people are staying on those pages, what the bounce rate is, all that type of thing, okay? How engaging that content is, etc. All right? You can actually do it a different way too, where maybe it's not about the topics, maybe it's more about like the mode, like do blogs work better, do videos work better? And you can group them like that. So it's just the opposite of how we did it here. So there's a few different ways to slice and cut up the data to give you a little bit more of an indication of what works, what doesn't, what do we need to change, how should we alter it, so you can continuously make little observations and little adjustments to create the best business outcomes. Okay. I think we've got about 10 minutes here, but the quote I'll leave you with, since we talked a little bit about basketball earlier, I'll leave you one from John Wooden. Failure is not fatal, but failure to change might be. So mistakes happen. Like bad news could be a good thing, right? Because without it, we can't make corrections. And if we're learning from history, we can positively impact our future. Okay. So those are the 9 gems. Hopefully you found those helpful. Here's my contact information if you want to reach out. Here's an oversized picture of my head as well with my email, Twitter, all that good stuff. If you have questions, I'm a pretty nice guy. Feel free to reach out. Don't be shy.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Wow. I know I have a lot of information to digest. So I know I have a lot of people asking if we're going to send out a recording, and the answer is absolutely. I'm going to process that this afternoon. So you should have an email in your inbox tomorrow morning. So let's get into some questions. So if you do have any questions for Chris, send them my way right now and I'll queue them up. I've got one to start off, Chris, from Becca. She asked, does the IP address filter that you mentioned cover a single device or all devices on a common network?
Typically, it's all on a common network. So, for example, I'm working from my beautiful home office in Mesa, Arizona. If I'm on my computer, my phone, or a tablet, it should be the same. It's essentially like your address on the internet. However, I would check that. So if you're working from an office building, sometimes there's more than one IP address. I would just run a couple of tests, and you can configure it that way just to make sure that you're excluding all of the internal traffic, or traffic from a client, or traffic from, if you've got an office in LA, an office in Dallas, an office in Miami, make sure you get everybody out of there so you're not distorting the data.
Yeah. Another comment actually came through. Aaliyah said Michael Jordan is the best basketball player of all time. So I think she just wanted to correct you.
I would agree. Yeah, point taken. Can't argue with that.
Alex
He's
asked,
making a case though. He's coming around.
I felt like LeBron was like the current active best player, so we could go either way.
That's the best way to put it, probably. The current. Yeah.
So another question. I've heard that using capital letters in UTM codes can create possible issues. What are your thoughts on this? That's from Alex.
I haven't seen that happen. I have no experience with that. Well, I should say I have experience with capital letters and lowercase letters, but I haven't seen any issues with that. Spaces can certainly cause issues. So you might have seen in that example we provided earlier with the UTM codes that I use underscores. I think the most important thing there is to find a naming convention that works. Where was that? Right there. Finding a naming convention that works is probably the best way to go. But spaces cause issues. I haven't seen it. I could be wrong here, but I haven't seen uppercase letters cause an issue, but spaces and funky characters certainly could.
Okay. A question, I don't know if we'll need a follow-up. It's from Jaigia. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. I know I am. But how do you know that your Google Analytics tracking is set up correctly? I'm not sure if that's something specific with one of the filters, but I don't know if you know what that might refer to.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing you might want to do is there are tools that I'll show you here in just a second. So I use Chrome. There's Tag Assistant, which is a little plugin that'll essentially make sure that if you run all your stuff through there, you can see what tags are placed on that site and whether they're firing properly. It's just a Chrome extension. If you look for Tag Assistant, you'll find it, but it's super helpful to kind of run checks. Here it is. So I would definitely get that and plug it in. And if you don't use Chrome, give it a shot. It's pretty great. So that's what I would use. There are a couple tools out there that will run like a script to see that all of your tags are in there. That's another virtue of using the tag manager. And so for Google Tag Manager, if you use that and you place that container tag on all of your pages, and you make sure that they fire everywhere, that's a really good way to make sure that you're covered. So in terms of doing a GA or Google Analytics audit, I would use Tag Assistant. And if you can, use Tag Manager because it'll help you out a lot.
A question from Charles. He said, we've been dabbling for digital marketing for the past 6 months, and I don't believe it's really driving any meaningful business impact. I'm leaning towards outsourcing our digital marketing. Do you have any tips or advice on how to find the best digital marketing partner?
Yeah, call Quinn. No,
either of us.
Yeah, no, I think, honestly, just, full transparency, all of my business comes from referrals. And so I would make friends with some really smart people in your particular city or state that are in the marketing industry, and just take them to lunch, take them to coffee, take them to drinks, and just ask a bunch of questions and find out who might be the best resource. You can go the agency route, you can go the independent consultant route. There's pros and cons to each depending upon your situation, but there's a lot of good people out there. I'm not sure where that person is located, but I might have some contacts in that area. LinkedIn is a really good place. I believe in reviews and recommendations. So finding people who have been favorably reviewed, things like that, would be good. In terms of just the digital marketing, wondering if it's working or not, hopefully some of the topics we talked about here today will give you some clues on where to look and where to find information about whether it's actually working or not. But I would start there and then look to outsource.
Yeah, and I think as long as you kind of see how their results are and make sure that they have, measurement in place and that they can really deliver results and report on it, then that will be super crucial, especially if they can help you from the strategy through implementation and then reporting at the end of the day. So, all right, well, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this. I learned a lot, and I know I've got a lot of good comments on here. And a lot of people did actually ask if we could share that spreadsheet, the Google Docs spreadsheet that you shared. So
Yeah, for sure. I'll send it your way.
okay,
Yep.
cool. Yeah, and I'll send that out to everyone. And again, I'll send everyone a recording and the slides tomorrow morning. And we do these every month, usually the second Thursday of the month. So our next one, I believe, is June 15th. And we're going to be talking about navigating between what Google says and what Google does. So that should be
Interesting.
pretty interesting. And our director,
There is a difference.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, our senior director of SEO services, Jim Bader, will be presenting that. So I think
Cool.
that's it for today. Thanks, everyone, and I'll be in touch tomorrow with that recording. Have a good one.